Good morning and welcome to our daily reflection for this Tuesday of the 30th week in Ordinary Time. The Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Luke. Jesus said, "What is the kingdom of God like? To what can I compare it? It is like a mustard seed that a man took and planted in the garden. When it was fully grown, it became a large bush, and the birds of the sky dwelt in its branches." Again he said, "To what shall I compare the kingdom of God? It is like yeast that a woman took and mixed in with 3 measures of wheat flour until the whole batch of dough was leavened." The Gospel of the Lord. Many of you who have heard me preach here before at St. Bridget's have heard me talk about my mother. My mother entered her eternal reward in 1998, over 20 years ago now, at the age of 57. Even though she died over 20 years ago, there is much of my mother that God is still using to teach me many things. One of the things was her great patience. We hear that saying so many times at different points in our lives, don't we? Patience is a virtue, and indeed it is. My mother, having had to endure much physical suffering, having had juvenile diabetes from the age of 4, was always able to exude that patience. A great example of it, I think, were her hobbies. For one, she was an avid reader. I remember always seeing her in the living room chair, always with a book, always with a novel. Or when we'd go on vacations or day trips to the beach, she always had a book she was reading. No time was ever wasted. She always enjoyed getting through that good book, no matter how long the book was. She also loved to do needlepoint tapestries as well. And anyone who has ever done that or seen someone do it, know those are not quick overnight projects. My family and I still have several of my mother's needle points in our home. One of my favorites is of a great tall ship, one of those clipper ships, I guess, with the huge sails. It hangs today in my living room at home. Once in a while when I look at it, I think of that labor of love that my mother performed to make this beautiful creation. Each color of the needlepoint, each detail, each part of the design would come to life by her pulling that yarn on a needle through each tiny hole. And as I look at that great ship hanging in my living room, I can still think back and picture her some 40 years ago, sitting in the living room of my childhood home for months on ends, patiently filling each little box of the needlepoint. Beautiful creation formed out of love and great patience. I often think I doubt my mother would be very happy with today's society. She would probably just wouldn't understand why we have this need to always rush around all the time to get 1,000 things done in just a few hours, seemingly not enjoying the process. As much as my mother enjoyed the finished product, she also enjoyed the process of creating the product. And so perhaps it is true with our faith life that we so often don't quite get the building up of the kingdom of God, the process. And so it was for those in Jesus' time. They were expecting a kingdom to come quick, where their enemies would be defeated, where they would have victory right away. And yet the kingdom that Jesus came to announce to them, the kingdom that he wants for us now, is not a kingdom of immediate gratification. It's a kingdom obtained through a process. Someone asked Jesus to describe the kingdom of God, and as Jesus does, he described it as he often described things in a way that they would understand in parables. He likened first the kingdom of God to a mustard seed. The smallest things, the smallest seeds, the smallest of anything really. But eventually that seed would grow into a great bush. But there'd have to be a process. And so it is with us. The gift of our faith for many of us planted within us as infants at our baptisms, and even for others who might begin their journeys later, it never comes all at once. The finished product doesn't come immediately. It's a process, and a beautiful process. I think the challenge we all face is that we often don't have patience for the process. And while God is nurturing the mustard seed in each of us, we are frustrated so often that the flowering bush of our liking is not what we see immediately. So what do? We give up on the process. We turn to other things. We don't appreciate the fact that perhaps, indeed, we are progressing, just like my mother's needle points. She took great joy when another section of the needle point was done. It wasn't a perfect picture yet, but it gave her hope and excitement that indeed the best was yet to come. And so it is for us as members of God's kingdom. We are indeed a needle point in process. We are indeed a work in progress. And yes, my friends, there's reason to be hopeful, despite the many holes that still need to be filled. The process is working, the seed is growing, the bread is rising, for indeed the best is yet to come. Thank you again so much for joining us today. May God bless you and keep you safe.